And we are live. Good evening there. Happy Saturday, if I can remember. It's the holiday. I can't keep track of the days, but I hope all of you sword lovers out there are having a real good New Year's. We are starting us off with a real good one. So we are going to look at a bunch of Japanese swords tonight in particular. It's always free form on the channel, and don't like to plan things out too much. But I do have a guest that I'm going to be inviting on this time, so we will try to stay slightly more on topic than usual. Recently, I have looked at a bunch more swords that are either Japanese reproductions or Japanese inspired reproductions. So we've looked at the Peach Guard Woyodao from LK Chen, the Budokan Wakazashi from LK Chen, and the Romance of Men Hibana Tachi. So those have all come in recently, and even though we're always kind of across the board looking at all sorts of different things, that's a bunch of Japanese related swords that are all happening kind of at the same time. And as a preview, I'm expecting at least one more Japanese style sword that's going to be coming in very soon to look at also. But there's been no surprise that I do appreciate Japanese swords for sure, and not within the realm of Japanese swords. The type of swords I like tend to be the older swords, the koto swords. Who doesn't like swords from like the Warring States periods, etc. And I especially like Tachi. And even though I enjoy studying them, I am not a collector. I'm not a Nihonto collector. That's not my field of specialty. And so even though while I have some to look at here, it's always better if I can talk to someone who actually actively collects and studies those type of swords. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. So without further ado, we are going to invite my friend to come and join the stream with us today. Everyone, please say hi to my good friend, Guccikatana. Guccikatana, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Guccikatana. So I have a couple of times directed folks to take a look at reviews you've done of swords. We've traded swords back and forth a couple of times. I think you've popped on and joined my stream once before. We were talking about the Tatsu katana, but for those who aren't familiar with the type of action you get into, tell us about what you specialize in, what type of sword related interest or martial art related interest. Tell us a little bit about yourself so folks know where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I'm Guccikatana, otherwise known as Way, Wes, whatever. I've known Andy for a pretty long time. I've been doing Kenjutsu. I wouldn't say super seriously, but you know, I've gone to the dojo for the past 8 years, and about oh my gosh, it's gonna be 3 years soon. About 2.5 years ago, I picked up a Nihonto, a Tachi that I thought was an Uchikatana, and got me into antique collecting. And then I started taking things more seriously. And as you see, I am in full getup. And yeah, Wakizashi, Tachi. Although this is not the sword I practice with, but this monster
Mm,
that's a
mm,
replica of it with a much longer suka. But
mm.
yeah, a little bit of background. I do Jiki Shinkage Ryu. Full name is Kashima Shinden Jiki Shinkage Ryu, a cousin school of Shinkage Ryu. And yeah, I decided one day, now that I have a Tachi, I'm going to learn Tachi just full on. So, although this
So,
is a Tachi and Uchikatana Koshiro, but that happened all the time.
getting after you got a single antique, you couldn't stop just there, huh?
Had to go all the way. Yeah.
So that's wonderful. How did you figure out to come across Kenjutsu specifically? Like growing up, karate was or taekwondo were always the dojos I saw in all the strip malls around.
So when I was really young, I was about 5 or 6 years old. When we moved to Oregon, I found a Kenpo dojo,
Mm.
and the instructor there, he had traveled around Japan. He had gone to many dojos, trained in many styles, and then he just decided, I'm going to open up a Kenpo dojo near me. So my grandmother and my mom were like, okay, yeah, you're going to go do that. My English name is slightly related to Bruce Lee,
Mm.
no secret. So I yeah, I got into Kenpo, and then later on, when I was after high school, I wanted to get into just sword martial arts. I'd been playing. It's gonna sound terrible. I was playing For Honor. I played Kensei, the samurai vanguard character, and I had also seen the film Harakiri, and I was
Mm,
reading Shigeru, and I was like, "This is awesome. I want to learn how to use swords." And then I got it was a crappy stainless steel katana, but that
mhm.
was like my first sword, and that I uh I went visit a kendo dojo, didn't like the vibe, and then I accidentally found my current dojo.
Mhm.
So that's how I got into kenjutsu as a whole.
So, someone who may not be familiar with Japanese schools and systems, so maybe they only come from out of Olympic martial arts, or maybe they even have exposure to HEMA. How are Japanese fencing schools divided? How does Kenjutsu differ from, let's say, Kendo, for example? What are the differences on the Japanese side of things?
Well, the main thing is, and there's going to be a misconception that kendo is fencing in
Mhm,
Japan, and in a way, like during the late Edo and Meiji period, that was true. When I believe Itoryu and my school, Jiki Shinkage Ryu, uh, heavily influenced early kendo and gekiken or geken, however you pronounce it. Safely sparring with Shinai was way, well, yeah, it was way safer than sparring with Bokuto
mhm,
because Bokuto will kill people.
mhm.
It's not hard to kill people. I mean, there's the story where Musashi uses a makeshift one to split Kojiro Sasaki's head open. It is not hard. It's very dangerous. So it's no wonder that Shinai became widespread, but Kendo teaches good things. It teaches you how to fight. It teaches you the fight brain, but the finer aspects of using a real sword is, well, it's lost. Shinai
Mhm,
don't weigh enough. They don't handle like Shinken, and some of the cuts. I mean, I've heard from various kendoka, and I'm not going to disparage the sport, but some people do not know how to cut through a target. They know how to cut at it, and that is something
mhm,
that's. I mean, you even see this in Olympic fencing, people who
mhm.
transfer to HEMA and then try to do test cutting. So you have to learn how to treat a target correctly. So that's pretty hard to learn.
So in Kenjutsu, what are some of if someone's not familiar with what goes on in a Kenjutsu dojo, is this something that is similar to what we see in HEMA sports clubs where we don full masks and you're going at each other with feather swords, or is it a different approach to studying the art of swordsmanship?
It really depends because there are, let's just say conservatively, there are hundreds of schools in Japan that still exist. Some are good, some are bad. That's just the usual. Some schools like Maniwa Nenryu, they have this whole helmet and a shinai that I believe is wrapped in leather, and
Mm,
it's a much heavier, but they're very hard on sparring. In Jiki Shinkage, we have sparring, but that's an after class expectation. Class will usually be okay. We go, and I'm an assistant instructor. I'm not going to say that I have a rank. That's just I'm there due to seniority. But like in class, we'll go through our exercises. Suburi, where you're just going through the motions of cutting with a weighted sword, a weighted wooden sword, usually well, suburito. You have one, Andy,
yeah.
but and then we'll go through the kata. We'll go through paired kata. We'll talk about some of the finer aspects of the kata, and maybe we'll do some tamashigiri, test cutting. But sparring is kind of an after instruction deal. And some schools spar, some don't. It really depends. It's hard to know. Even
Mhm.
within my own school, it's very fragmented and not all the branches spar. So I
In
wouldn't say it's like HEMA, but it's more like, I mean, really, you could go look up. Actually, I guess it would be like HEMA. It's kind of hard to say. It's in a complicated like
Mhm.
middle ground.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Obviously, it's difficult to make blanket statements across how every Ryuha will do something. having done some choreo in the past, mostly unarmed martial arts before, uh, would you say that there might be a tendency to hold off on doing that type of not exactly randori, but the or kumite, the kind of free form sparring, and reserving that for more advanced students, and just saving fundamental and kata for folks that are just stepping into it, because I think you see in a lot of modern sporting martial arts, whether it's MMA or certainly things like HEMA, people really want to just kind of start as on day one, and just, even if they're not going full force, they'll want, the expectation is, oh, I'm going to have a sword. I'm going to, even if it's just a boffer, I'm going to want to start whacking the other guy with it, and get that kind of, get their juices flowing, and get the sense of it.
Well, for me, because I was one of my sensei's first long-term students,
Mm-hmm.
when I first started out, I didn't even touch a sword. He handed me a stick, and I walked around the dojo, and this went on for a couple months. I was learning the so in our curriculum we have what's called the hojo, and it's the breathing techniques, the breathing exercises, and we have a whole curriculum based on it. And I just did that for months with a stick in my hand, and I would walk around the dojo, and he would just have that. And if I did it wrong, he would yell at me, or he'd hit me with a lightly on the back of the leg with a shinai. But if you display competency, and my instructor's a little more unorthodox with the way the school's taught, so we get into sparring pretty quickly, but it's with like Fukuro Shinai,
Mm-hmm.
and even then, our kata require Fukuro Shinai because we don't get into Shinken until our Kodachi no kata, and even then,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really done with Shinken. That's really done with a Kodachi-sized Bokuto. So I would say maybe if you really display competency and we feel that you're ready to spar, you'll be under like supervised sparring, and it'll look somewhat like kendo. But that's because my school's half the reason kendo exists. So
Okay, excellent. I don't know if you can see it on your
I
end.
do, yeah.
We have Cuter who has started asking us questions. We see you, Cuter. You're jumping ahead slightly, since that'll be the next part once we get into talking about swords. But just to round things out, um, why? Because people, I know people will want to ask. So in to a lesser extent in Chinese sword systems, but certainly in HEMA, we see there is a large interest not only in engaging in doing kind of these sporting competitions, perhaps because there wasn't they don't have any existing living lineages, so they're trying to recreate their sword systems. But there's an interest also in doing these mixed weapon bouts, to whether they'll pit longsword against saber, or what have you, either for fun or as perhaps a means to test if their system is useful beyond longsword against longsword. And again, some of that may be just because they're still trying to see if what they've actually researched is actually useful beyond
Right.
what that one one fencing master from the 1600s thought he was actually
Does
talking
Meyer know
about.
what he's talking about?
Yeah,
That's the question
exactly.
everyone has.
Um, in my experience, it seems like there's not that much interest in doing that sort of cross-cultural exchange on the Japanese side of thing. Do you think we'll see more of that going forward, or do you think that there will continue to be only there'll be limited opportunities for these kind of East versus West type of fencing matches?
Well, one thing that I've seen, and I'm not going to take jabs at people because that's
Hmm.
not what I'm here to do, is there's an over there's an over focus on safety.
Mhm.
And one of the things I think people need to accept is that in the context of sparring and learning how to use real weapons, there is an accepted risk that your training implements may injure you. And
Mm.
yes, getting injured is a risk. I mean, I have been injured quite a bit actually, but I've and people used to die all the time, especially in the Edo period. I mean, Bokuto had you just die, and that's that. That was just an accepted part of life. That's not acceptable anymore, but
Mhm.
accepted risk is something that I mean, I had to just come to terms with. I may get injured severely.
Mm.
Um, that's one side of the issue because a lot of people don't want to spar with Bokuto. We spar at the higher level of Bokuto, but
Mhm.
that's not common anymore. Um, the issue too is that with Japanese swords, we don't have a sparring tool
Mm.
outside of Shinai and Bokuto that's adequate. Like there is the Akado Uchigatana, which I have a lot of beef with, but it's acceptable.
Mm.
But my main issue is that in many of your cuts, you're going to feel when the blade wobbles, and that's just not acceptable. And I think the final point is that you can't bring non Nihonto into Japan, and ultimately the
Mm.
headquarters of a lot of Koryu are in Japan. So you're not going to see guys being able to really bring fetters because I'm pretty sure they're still considered weapons,
Hmm.
especially not those swords that are just blunted. You
Yeah.
can't bring those into Japan. And many schools were already pressure tested hundreds of years ago. Like, I mean, just in the Edo period alone, my school had was part of the three great swordsmen of the Edo period, which I mean, I don't care about that statement, but a lot of schools already did get pressure tested. So you have all these points to contend with.
Right.
I think in the future we might see it, but we need better implements
Mm.
before we can allow that because I mean, just speaking from experience, Bokuto will eat up fetters. And they
Yeah.
with those sparring rapiers, that those cup guards will get dented and it's not easy to get your hand out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm talking to friends who are reviving the art of competitive jianfa, and they're moving from their long practice of using wooden jian into using steel jian trainers, and that's opening up different types of opportunities for them. But it's obviously a lot of institutional inertia to overcome because who's going to go through all the hassle of changing all the gear and all the tradition of what is required for you can do things with wood that you can't with steel and vice versa. So there's obviously going to be a change. If there are things you there are always going to be pros and cons to each. And it's interesting because I always am a fan of saying there's a place for all tools in training. Like I think synthetics have their place. I think that even foam buffers have their place. But obviously, when you have something like Japan is very unique in that it has a very robust living tradition of we have been doing this for a very long time and we know how and why we want to do what we're doing. Whereas, for instance, in Europe, where they're kind of creating everything on the fly from the ground up, and they're just trying to figure out what's going to work. They're using many, many, many more separate types of swords and trying to see will the same thing for small sword really work as for Langsmesser? Do you have to figure out if you can even use the same type of materials, etc. So that's all really really fascinating. Gonna say a quick hello to everyone in chat as we're talking. Wudang Sword Academy over there. He echoes your sentiments. Martial arts are dangerous and will get you injured. Sports are where you ideally shouldn't be getting injured. So that's
Right.
an important distinction. You should be upfront about what you intend, whatever you're practicing to be doing, and everyone who is engaging in it should be one, fully aware of all the risks that they're taking, and two, fully in agreement and accord. There shouldn't be any surprises to what you guys are doing, and hopefully disclaimers and rule sets should help alleviate all that. And then to anyone who is watching, we had teased what Cuter was talking about before. He saw what title I put for the live stream up there. So, what is exactly the distinction between an Uchikatana and a Tachi? Is It's just the mounting on the scabbard, and the longer length and curvature is just general trend and not a defining feature. All right, so Guccikatana, your name even sounds like what our topic of conversation. I'm going to give you a really easy question. What's the difference between a tachi and a katana?
It depends. To quote Matt Easton, it depends.
What's the
Now,
context?
so Tachi is the word that the Japanese have been using for swords for, I mean, since they've had written language. For the term is probably older than when we gave them the ability to write. The Chinese, they use Chinese today still, and Tachi just means long sword, big sword. If I remember correctly, it's not too dissimilar to the term Chongdao. I believe they even use the same characters. Uh, Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. Basically, Tachi, all sword, like all long swords you use with two hands could be considered a Tachi. But if you want to get into like the nitty gritty, how do I? There's a few things. So one, people typically think of the older style of swords where, hold on, let me get. So this weird sword is something I've had for a long time. This is I guess what you would call a karatachi, but it's just an uchigatana blade. But it's meant to be worn, edge down like this on the hip, and you would draw edge down like that. Typically, they were hand and a half to. Well, it really depends. We don't have that many surviving examples from that long ago, but typically cavalry swords and whatnot. But then as you evolve and the swords change over time, and people like to attribute the invasion of Tsushima by the Mongols and Kublai Khan as a major change to the Uchigatana, I think that's overblown. But Tachi do change, and there's a lot of them. Whereas here's a sword that's 500 years old, and it's not that long, but the blade is very curved. I don't know if it really picks up on camera well, but just in there alone, you can see the handle's curved, and that's not even uniform across Tachi. So I would just say it depends on how you wear it, how it's mounted. The blade shape is something. You can have a completely naked blade labeled as a Tachi, and most people be like, okay, what's your proof of that? And then you look at the finer things, the measurements and some other things. It's a whole rabbit hole. Tachi edge down, Uchigatana edge up, and then Koshirai. I mean, doesn't matter. You can have an Uchigatana and Tachi Koshirai edge down. It's a Tachi now. You can have a Tachi edge up and Uchigatana Koshirai, which is what I practice with.
I like to use the aphorism that Japanese swords like to engage in cosplay, so it makes it very difficult to positively identify them once they're dressed.
Right. It takes a bit to figure out the differences, but I'd say generally a lot of Tachi tend to be on the longer aspect or the longer length compared to Uchigatana, especially the Edo period. Because you do have Uchigatana and the Sengoku that are like Tachi length, but they don't have the Tachi slender and other Sugata aspect. So Sugata being blade shape, if I remember correctly. I explained that very poorly, but that's kind of the gist.
No. Like it's a question that comes up all the time. In some ways, I think it's actually easier to tell apart Uchikatana and Tachi Koshirai than it is the blades. Like the blades can sometimes be a little, if there's no mei on them, then you're like, okay, what did the smith intend this blade to be? Which is why you've probably seen on a lot of my videos, I sometimes drop the terms altogether. I use daito, which just means the big sword, and kind of covers both of them, because Uchikatana and Tachi both are like two-handed big swords, daito being swords over 2 shaku in blade length. In general, like Guccikatana said, usually Tachi are intended to be a battlefield sword worn suspended down from the obi, so worn edge down, which makes it easier to wear on horseback. So just like we see in Persia, just like we see in the Middle East, just like we see in Poland, if you're riding a horse, it's easier to have a cavalry saber suspended at length. And so if I have my tachi over here, then you dangle it like this. You can still wear it on foot like that, but if you're planning to wear it on horseback, then this makes sense. And so people who are making them will sign the blade, will sign their mei on the nakago with the understanding that the edge is going to be faced down.
Tachime versus the other one that I'm forgetting the name of.
Yeah. So by contrast, Uchikatana were intended to be worn inside of the obi. You know, the name literally means striking sword. The idea is you're wearing it closer to your body, and then you can grab it very quickly and do shorter strikes from that. Now, I have long had opinions about the size between the two of them and have assumed that Uchikatana started very short and grew longer into a more daito size blade. I have only just in the last week come across research that kind of turns all of that upside down and on its head, so I will not be going too deeply into that size. As West just said, in general, but both of them can be any size. So you can have short tachi and long uchikatana, and you can have short uchikatana and long tachi, or you can have both.
Right.
In general, from what I have studied, and it varies wildly depending on what time period you're on, you have different styles across different time periods. Also, in general, uchikatana tend to be a little bit more consistent in their size and shape, and tachi tend to be kind of just all over the place. It's like you can have whatever type of tachi you want. You can have a long one, you can have a straight one, you can have a curved one, you can have a short one, you can have kind of whatever tachi you want. In general, there are always going to be exceptions to both of those rules, but that's generally what I'd say. And like he said, if you want to wear one in a different type of dress, you can. So you can take your tachi out of its tachi mounts, put it in uchikatana mounts, and then stick it in your obi, and now it's your uchikatana.
I mean, famously, the samurai that led the expedition to Egypt, that famous photo of the samurai sitting in front of the Sphinx, he wore tachi in tachi koshirai, edge up in obi. In his portrait, that's very modern. He's posed like this, and you see tachi koshirai in obi,
and the sword police didn't chase him down, huh?
They did. Well, he kind of had a little bit of a legal advantage, so.
So just to echo, we Joe M. Max says Tachi are just upside down uchikatana. You're probably not too far from the truth. So what are you holding for us there, Wes?
It's a tachi.
It's a tachi.
It's an
huh? So do you want to tell us about the specifics about that sword that you have that you're holding in front of you?
Yeah, sure. So this sword is the second iteration of a long project where I should grab this sword carefully because it is 500 years old. This blade was my first antique, and I fell in love with the handling. But this has a metal.
500 years old. Doesn't that look like a modern made koshirai? You're gonna have to explain that to all the friends at home.
So this sword was brought by the Watanabe clan, a member of it, into World War II, into naval service. And then he survived the war, and he modified the saya so it would not be captured by the American occupiers. But this blade is from like mid Muromachi period, so it is a shorter tachi, but it is a tachi. But yeah, it is World War II furniture. Navy sword, Type 97. And I love this sword so much, but I can't practice with it because it has a metal koiguchi. And the previous owner already was a terrible swordsman, and he could not sheath this because there are scratches all on the spine. So I was like, okay, well, I can't practice this. It has no
So you've never cut with it?
I've cut with it a few times against people's opinion. But this is the second iteration of a set of customs that
Mm,
were spread out, where I wanted to practice with it, but I wanted the blade dimensions to be similar.
mm.
So it's dimensionally similar in ratio and everything else, and in handling. If you one-hand it, it's almost impossible to tell the difference. But yeah, this was the ultimate form of customs, and it didn't break the bank, which they usually do
So,
for
so
measurement accurate.
who was able to produce that for you? Who did such a good job?
This was made by Ryan Sword, which historically has had a questionable reputation.
Hmm.
I took the chance on a custom, and the first custom was actually closer in measurements to the antique,
Hmm.
but it was the wrong blade geometry. That was my fault because I filled out the form wrong. This one I made no mistake. I even asked for a longer suka, which is not present, but it's how I like it. And I scaled up the measurements, I rounded them up, but it's still functionally very much the same sword. So, and it was under $400. Can't
I was
beat
go-
that.
I was gonna try and make your. I don't know if I can make you bigger. No, I can't make you bigger. I just put up that screen. But that's a wonderful price point for custom work. Do you remember approximately how long that took, just out of curiosity, for them to produce that?
So there was a heat wave in Longchuan, the city
Hmm.
where they work in. So it was about a month extension, but it was still like 2.5 months, 2 months range,
That's not too bad.
which is a
Yeah.
really good turnaround
Hmm.
for a custom sword. That is not only measurements wise,
Hmm.
basically everything I asked for, but the finish on the blade, ignoring graining, the
Hmm.
hada, like all the things you look at for tamahagane, uh, the finish is so well done. I almost thought it was machine assisted.
Wow, that's great.
Because you usually can see the ripples when they
Yeah.
hammer. You can't see that at all on the Ryan sword. It's actually very scary. I thought it was machine assisted, but maybe you can see it here. But
Yeah, we
there's
can see the
no,
reflection is beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah, there's no
there's no
sign of
rippling
rippling
at
right there.
all. It's very crazy.
That's wonderful. And so this is the sword that you actively use for to practice with, since it's so close to your original antique.
Yes, I do cut testing with it. I do suburi with it. I do kata. I practice, although very poorly, EI with it because we don't have an EI curriculum.
Yeah.
Uh, I do just about everything. I even use it when I instruct, when I'm demonstrating cuts or certain kinds of, let's just say, intercepts on thrusts or
Mhm.
things, and I need a steel implement. That's my go-to sword.
And part of the reason that we're having this discussion is the uh, the sword that I showed earlier. This this sword that I recently picked up. So this is has been sent to me for review by Romance of Men. It's the Hibana Tachi, and by coincidence, it has specifications that are very, very similar to your antique, and by extension, the Ryan sword. Here, I'll do it the same direction you were.
Oh yeah,
Here,
okay.
I'll yeah.
It's very crazy how close these swords are dimensionally.
Yeah, so the Nagasa is almost exactly the same. The Koshirai is almost exactly the same. This one is slightly heavier, I seem to recall, or I'm sorry, it's slightly lighter because it has a bohi in it, correct?
Yeah,
And I think that the uh, Sakihaba is slightly wider also, so it doesn't taper the way most Tachi do.
yeah.
So I think that it's very slightly wider than you would expect a similar Tachi. That's about the only noticeable difference in specs. Otherwise, everything else is very, very similar.
And the only thing that's different about mine too is that I went for a geometric yokote,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a kolkisaki on it because that's more in
Mm.
line with my antique, and that's also more in line with older style swords, which is what I am interested in.
this one does have a little itty bitty yokote on there. It's not huge, but it's present. And again, the amazing thing about this one is this is less than $300. This is like $280 sword that they've been able to produce. And on first glance, this would look like one of those tacky, mall swords that isn't going to hold up for anything. But on closer inspection, this is actually very finely produced, and it's rather remarkable. Why do you think that there are not very many Tachi on market right now for people to use? Why what are the difficulties in using a Tachi compared to someone who's used to using an Uchikatana?
So there's the practicality aspect. The majority of people who are buying swords to use, it's usually either because they're practicing iaido or they do a or you have kenjutsu or even aikiken and they need a shinken for whatever reason, or they do tamashigiri competitions. And the uchigatana is what almost all schools practice with. No one specializes in tachi. I may use a tachi, but fundamentally we still teach uchigatana. Uh, that's one aspect. The other is you can't really wear tachi comfortably in obi. Not like comfortably, but you know what I mean. Like it just doesn't look right. When people think of samurai, they think of the uchigatana and the obi with the wakizashi, and they're looking for a very specific kind of koshirai. Tachi are not that. And then the type of curvature some people aren't used to.
Mm,
I mean, I love how it feels, but some people just don't. They prefer the expectation of where the sword is going to strike on the monouchi. I mean, I'm sure you, who's cut with a lot of uchigatana, it is slightly different to cut with Tachi.
it is. So I've only done limited. The weather hasn't allowed me to cut with this very much so far. But here, I'm going to show off the curvature on camera again. And what has happened right away when I try and cut with it is it feels like there's more reach than it actually has, just based on the length of the sword. And you don't have to reach as far backwards because the curvature already has the sword behind you. So it's already loaded for a cut.
Right.
It naturally has a slicing action, but the opposite of a the curvature in the grip, I think I pointed out to you, is the reverse that you'd expect as far as delivering additional power. So whereas you'd expect it to be curved this way if you wanted to increase the power in it, this allows you to draw backwards for like close quarter striking, which means you actually have to almost want to be really close to the target unless you're kind of throwing the sword out during each cut. Yeah, you end up with your forward hand really launching out in order to deliver the cut. Just as a side note, I found this to be a fearsome cutter, this specific one from Romance of Men.
Well, and that's another thing too. Not only are Tachi really good cutters, and you see a lot of some of them are a lot wider than Uchigatana. This one is slightly wider. You can even see it's a little bit wider than your usual Uchigatana that comes from longswords. But also thrusting with these swords is somewhat dangerous in the context of paired kata, because as you can see, your point of thrust is going to be different than an Uchigatana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let me just grab the Uchigatana bladed Tachi that I have. You compare the thrust, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Like
much easier to deliver.
So Tachi are going to be pretty frowned upon. Like I wouldn't want to hand a new guy who's been practicing Uchigatana a Tachi and then try to do paired kata with him that involves any kind of thrust, because it's something that you have to get used to. which is why I also don't use Tachi when I'm introducing people to paired kata, and I'm having to teach them because it. What happens if they get used to that first, and then they get an Uchikatan, the timing's all wrong, and then yeah, the risks, as we
Yeah.
said, the risks.
Yeah, I can definitely see how there will be some difficulties in transitioning techniques from one sword to the other. Everyone likes to make a big deal about the katana being the curved sword of Japan. It really isn't in the context of Nihonto. Like obviously there are much more heavily curved swords than most uchikatana by Japanese sword standards. They're reasonably straight most of the time, which actually is good if you're thinking about delivering Suki, if you're thinking about delivering a thrust. The Tachi again, I always go back to if you curve a sword, like Russ Mitchell says, it allows you to cheat and have a longer sword into a shorter space. So it really, to me, it feels like not only can I put more sword on target in the same amount of area, but it also gives me more sword if I'm trying to defend myself against someone else at the and not have the expense of carrying around something that's even bigger than the amount of sword that I would have to otherwise have. Obviously, Europeans do the same thing, but as I was discussing with you earlier, a European sword is going to have an extra, between 10 and 20 centimeters on the end of the tip, that will not cut as well as a Nihonto will all the way out to the tip of the Kasaki.
Right,
So with a European sword, you are not going to be able to draw and cut single-handed from the scabbard um, a sword that is 110 centimeters in blade length, which is going to be doing the same work as your Tachi that's 80 centimeters in blade length or something similar,
right.
just because of how compact the sword is. Um, anyway, that's initial observations I have by handling the reasonably curved Tachi. I see that Francis Chen has asked a question for you, so directly to you. What's Wes's philosophy on collecting antiques? As one gets to Honzon, Tokubetsu, Honzon, and Joyo, how would each person decide their farthest that they'll go? Do you have an opinion on high-end Nihonto collections?
uh, it's rich that Francis is the one asking this question of all people.
It seems like
Um,
he has a decision that he might need to have a little someone come and rescue him from his pickle.
I sure hope not. Um, well, for me, the first paper in the Nihonto I bought was a Tomtom in Shirosai. It was of the Kanei school. It was about a little bit younger than my Tachi, about the same age as this Wakizashi, actually.
Mhm.
And I mean, I spent $1,050 on it. I wouldn't have spent any more. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have spent more than 800 on a blade like that, but it was a really nice blade. I mean,
Mm,
you remember how it looked. It was
yeah.
immaculate polish for a sword that did not look tired. Uh, but I mean, if you're pushing into like Tokubetsu Hozon, I feel like you're either a collector or you're really looking for like the sword to like put on your wall and occasionally like maybe do Suburi with or even a singular cut with it. Uh, I mean, I wouldn't spend. I've never had a Tokubetsu Hozon, although I held a Juyo. I held multiple
Mm.
recently, and all those swords I wouldn't buy. I mean, even though they were really nice swords, I wouldn't buy them.
N-
Yeah,
Now,
because I'm not a collector. I'm a practitioner. So
well, and that's what I was just going to say. Like, you are a sword collector, not a smith collector. Is that fair to say? Because I do know people who will obviously chase schools or smiths almost exclusively
and we
rather
know a
than
guy.
necessarily.
He's Zen. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, if I, I'll be honest, if I could find a Tachi like this
Mm,
by and I somehow figure because this is an unsigned blade.
yes.
If I could somehow find an identical clone of this sword that was signed by the same smith, I would. Even if it was like a $3,000 sword, I would buy
Mm,
it. That said, I don't hunt smiths down. Like, I don't care about Masamune or Muramasa or Yasutsuna or any of them. Would I like to own a sword from them? Who wouldn't? At the same time, I don't have the rack space and I cut with all of my antiques.
mm, mm.
So that's sacrilege to some people.
Also, to anyone listening, my birthday's coming up. So if you have a Nihonto that you'd like to send my way to start my antique collection in Japanese swords, I'm more than open to accepting donations. But like anything, you have to live within your means, and I appreciate what Wes is talking about. We all have a limited amount of time and resources available, so you have to figure out what you'd like your collection to look like, and you can structure it in that direction. It's not that early. I still have several months to go, but thank you for the the early birthday sentiments. So we appreciate that. Um, I don't have space as is. That is the issue. Fortunately, I'll be creating a little bit more space in the not too distant future, but there space is more a premium than the funding for purchasing swords. I'd say at this point, I'd like to develop a new rack system so I can better put up some of the ones, especially the ones that are visiting for an extended period over here. That would always be nice. Um, there was a question I had for you relating to, and it's escaped me. Um, if you have a tachi in handachi or uchikatana koshirai, you still refer to it as tachi in your opinion, yes?
So if I was talking about the context of usage, I would
Yes.
refer to it how it's worn.
Okay. So
In my dojo, I hate saying my dojo, but in the dojo, I refer to all swords as uchikatana, even if it's blatantly a tachi.
okay.
Uh, I have I've had the opportunity to swing a much older tachi than what I have
Mm,
from the 1200s, and I still refer to that as just a daito.
mm,
But if I was talking about the finer aspects, like let's say I'm in a call with friends and we're looking at antiques on a website. If it's a Tachi blade in Uchigatana Koshirai, we're calling it a Tachi.
yeah.
Whereas if it's, I mean, this was probably this was a much longer sword, but I still think this was an Uchigatana at one point. Maybe a short one, or maybe just a really long wakizashi.
Hmm.
But if this was a cut down Tachi, I would call it a Tachi
Hmm.
in the identification of the blade, but it's a wakizashi in use. Because I
Hmm.
mean, it's a two-handed short sword, you know.
Now, oh, that's actually what I was going to ask you about, since you had mentioned it during one of your kata or one of your forms earlier. Kodachi, since that's a term that comes up in martial arts from time to time. As a sword type, they seem incredibly rare, to the point that if you read like um Sesco or what have you, there's questions as to what they were even for. Um, and we only have like maybe one or two example, a handful of examples of koshirai for kodachi, really small kodachi. Do you have opinions on them compared to wakizashi style shoto?
Well, so historically speaking, and I'm gonna make a really huge generalization
Hmm.
based on just what I've read, because I'm not that well read on the ultimate history of Tachi, but I know
Hmm.
some like outlines. Tachi tended to be a lot more slender for the
Hmm.
length because they had to be used one-handed on horseback. And as you see with a lot of sabers, especially long sabers that are meant to be used on horseback, they tend to be really long but slender.
Hmm.
I believe Killage are like that.
Hmm.
Uh, and I believe Polish saber is to an extent as well. But obviously those are much older or much newer swords than Itachi. Kodachi tend to follow the same thing, but they are shorter blades.
Hmm.
Uh, in the context of our kata actually, well, our school is unique in that we exclusively use wakizashi two-handed because our wakizashi were kodachi.
Hmm.
But the in the grand scheme of things, you do rarely see kodachi because many of them just broke. They were, you know, more slender, or they're just old. I mean,
Hmm.
by the time of the Sengoku, some of these kodachi were already 400 years old.
Yeah.
So I mean, they got melted down, they got broken, maybe they got converted into tanto, either through machiokuri or osuriage. Um, yeah, we just don't have many of them because they're an older type of sword. Like we have more
Yeah,
Uchigatana.
they definitely don't seem to have continued in popularity into the Muromachi and beyond. So they are definitely a rare relic of the early Koto period. Um,
And wakizashi are just easier to use one-handed.
mhm.
And so are tanto. I mean, obviously tanto are one-handed blades, but to use these two-handed only makes sense if the handle is longer and the blade's longer, which I guess is a holdover the fact that the school has its origins in the Sengoku period, but
Yeah.
our school is actually a little newer than that. So,
Can I ask you what length suka you use for that wakizashi?
I don't
You
have a
don't have
tape
any way.
measure.
You don't have any way to measure it. It's okay if you don't have any way to
Hold
measure
on,
it.
we're gonna do the
I'm
work
calling.
way.
I'm totally calling you out on your. There you go.
Uh, so this is a 25 centimeter suka.
Yeah.
So chop off like a little bit of that, I guess, and
Okay.
yeah,
So yeah, maybe
I'll measure it for you later.
18 centimeters or something like that.
Yeah.
So recently there was the Wodao that I got from LK Chen, and I noticed it was shorter than a typical Longchuan suka that they have on there, and generally Dao have shorter grips than Japanese swords, and that seemed to have been true
Oh, did I lose you?
if they if they if they ever captured Japanese swords, they would cut down the tang and mount it on a shorter grip as well. So it's kind of like a katate uchi style of mounting that seems to be popular on the continent compared to in Japan. Obviously, Chinese had really big two-handed swords, but not like hand and a half style swords. That didn't seem to be a thing in China by comparison. It's kind of interesting.
I think part of the reason for that is Katate Uchi is really not. It has a very short amount of time where it's relevant.
Mm.
I say short, about like 100, 120 years, give or take. If we're being conservative, I'd say even a little longer because it's just easier to make shorter swords. And
Mhm.
Ashigaru, they're not samurai. They're peasants, militia that you bring into your army. And those would have been the primary wielders of Katate Uchi
Mhm.
and Kazuichi Mono, the one-use swords that you throw away after.
Yeah.
Funny enough, this is a Katate Uchi Tachi, but it was not made for some chump. Either the guy was really small or this is just how he, got the sword. Because not all Nihonto were custom made. Sometimes you just bought a sword that the smith had finished.
Yeah.
So
So, um, not knowing much about how the Ashigaru were using them, is it that they wanted something that's just on the larger side of a wakizashi? Because on the continent, I'd imagine in most cases they're using it similar to a peidao, which the advantage is you can have one hand on a shield and the other hand on a sword. But in Japan, that probably is not going to be happening since shield use is very limited.
right.
Um, so the Shigeru are using it, with teppo or with just bow and arrow, or what would they
Yari.
be accompanying it? Just yari, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
A lot of Ashigaru, and you have to separate your idea of Ashigaru is going to be very
Hmm.
often the Jingasa,
Hmm.
maybe just do,
Hmm.
and maybe some kote, and maybe that's it, like sandals.
Hmm.
Now the Jingasa, that's a little modern,
Hmm.
and that's something that you can kind of blame movies and video games and TV shows for that. Go read Gunsen history. Gunbai, he can tell you more about it.
Shout out to Gunsen.
Shout out to
If
Gunsen.
anyone's watching this, please go check out his X account.
But yeah, I mean, if you're wielding a really long yari, and let's say you just tried to stab a samurai, you missed, and he cuts your yari shaft in half. Well, you're not going to want a sword that's too short to defend yourself on a battlefield,
Mm.
but you're not going to also want a sword that's too long that's unwieldy. Now, a lot of these katateuchi blades are full length, like
Yeah,
65 to 71 centimeter cutting edge with hand and a half or barely two-handed grips,
yeah,
or even like two and a half, but
yeah. Mhm.
shorter nakugo and whatnot.
Right.
It depends. It's on a spectrum.
Yeah, I'll really. I almost wish I could take the pin out and see what they have under the peach guard. Would you humor me if I could just measure what the ska is
Go
the
ahead.
tang on the Ming Dao? Hang on. So if not on a Shigeru, this is for some Ming soldier, we'll assume. I believe it's a 75 centimeter Nagasa. So it's a big blade, but the ska here is 22 centimeters. So it's not a very long grip.
It's actually
It's
shorter
odd.
than my Tachi.
Yeah. So that, and because it's not quite Hirazakuri, but as I mentioned to you before, it is incredibly thin. It's like the Sakisane is like 2 millimeters
Right.
at the end. So as a result, it makes for wielding in one hand very practical.
I don't know if that really takes
Yeah,
a
look
lot.
at that. Here, let me hold this one up by comparison.
But this also has Kisaki flair, whereas I don't think yours has. Is that
Nope.
right?
Yeah, this does not, but that's a lot of yours has a lot more meat. So
And this is a
tentatively,
really worn out Wakizashi too. So
so tentatively, I'm going to assume that that's how that. If again, I've talked to LK Chen, and he says that that's based on a continental build. So they're imitating a Japanese sword rather than a Japanese sword that was brought to China and mounted Chinese style. So this is a Longchuan reproduction, probably from a smith who specializes in Japanese swords, but is recreating a Chinese sword that was based on Muromachi era Japanese swords that has
or
come
even
full circle.
Momoyama period, because
Perhaps, yeah.
a lot of Chinese well, let's say a lot of Chinese made Japanese swords of that time period in
Mhm,
the very early Edo period are very clearly like, we just got done with the Imjin War. We have all these Japanese swords. They're pretty good.
mhm.
We should start making them. It's like, okay, it works. I mean, as you see Ming crossbowmen's now, that's just a katana with extra steps.
Yep, yep, absolutely. So it's an interesting piece, and I'll once weather is permitting, I'll absolutely do a little bit more testing. What are is there any type of for anyone out there who might be interested in seeing how their sword, or might be interested in picking up a tachi rather than a katana? Obviously, we looked at this Romance of Men. We talked about Ryan's sword. What's something that they might be interested in being able to do in their test cutting with Itachi that might distinguish it from just a standard uchi katana?
It That's a little bit difficult because
Mhm.
everyone cuts a little differently. I
Yeah.
mean, even from school to school, they say there's only so many ways to swing a sword, and
Hmm.
there's truth to that, but there's also a lot of wrong with that. Um, like they also say there's only so many ways to swing a baseball bat, but as you see, the Japanese don't swing their bats like the Americans do. They
Hmm.
swing inwards. The Americans swing outwards like they're cutting down a tree. Uh, I'd say it's a little harder to distinguish when it comes to cut testing, but something that you'll notice, and we struggled with this actually a few almost a year ago.
Mm.
push cutting in a thrust with a
Mm.
Tachi much more noticeable, where it actually becomes really difficult to measure the thrusting effectiveness without half sorting and
Mhm.
guiding it in. As for cutting, I mean, being able to do like I guess from the costuming guard, like winding cuts into follow-ups,
Mm.
but I mean, you can do that with an Uchigatana, so it's not really as big of a difference as saying like comparing the LK Tong Hangdao
Mhm.
to a normal Uchigatana, whereas that's like a one-handed Dao that you can
Yeah.
really maneuver like a gen,
Yeah.
a very meaty gen, but still. So yeah, I'd say it's a little hard to kind of point out differences. You I mean, I guess you could try doing like draw cuts from edge down, but that's really easy to mess up your Saya. So
Yeah, so I have practiced some EI, although it's going on 20 something years since I practiced that kata with any regularity. So I'm hesitant to do that with any conviction out of Asaya. And again, obviously, people do like to do Batado or EI because let's face it, it looks cool. It's really fun to be able to do a draw and strike and cut. I'm always hesitant because muscle memory makes me want to do Noto and put a wet blade back into the Saya. And I don't want to gum up my Saya doing that. But something that would be interesting to do with such a curved blade for sure. I don't know exactly what it would look like. I've tried doing similar drawing cuts with my straight long blades. It's tricky with a long blade like a gen or a long sword. And I think that if the blade was curved, that would make it significantly easier to perform drawing cuts from. So
one
we're
of the
going to get.
difficulties,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't really have the space to do it, but one of the difficulties of using a Tachi and Uchigatana Kushiro like this is it's not actually that hard if you do Sayabiki, but if you
Mhm.
don't do any Sayabiki at all, you just try to draw it. Well, you just try to draw it, you're gonna struggle a little bit
Mm.
because either it's too curved and then you need to tilt it, or you just don't have the arm length. Whereas
Yeah.
I've noticed with straighter blades, it's very easy to just draw without having to do much.
Yep. Great demonstration.
I mean, it's worth pointing out. I don't do much katana stuff on my channel, so
All right, guys, we might be wrapping up soon. So if we have questions for Mr. Guccikatana or myself, make sure that you drop them in the chat before we go. Um, I I was going to point out. Um, of course, I always get myself distracted when I was talking about it. We were talking about different target cutting. Obviously, uh, we should have no problem looking at things like bamboo or tatami. Bamboo is, of course, a fine target to try, in addition to usual things like water bottles, etc. Um, Once again, I there aren't very many options for off-the-shelf Tachi. So the Romance of Men one I will be reviewing in the not too distant future formally on my channel, but for now I will easily endorse it based on the price point. It's a great example. I don't. Oh, I do have the Tang Hang Dao actually. For you, you have the LK10 Tang Hang Dao that got sent your way. I have also the earlier one, the Frontier Tang Hang Dao, which has a more classic Chokuto style blade on it. So I will be trying to conduct an experiment where, because it has very good edge sharpness, as all LK Chen swords do, and it has about the correct Nagasa for a typical katana. I'd like to do a comparison between the Frontier Tang Chokuto on Uchikatana and the very heavily curved Tachi, because everyone wants to know how much the curvature makes a difference in the cut. So that would be something to consider on what type of targets or what type of cuts we can execute using three swords of similar length, of similar sharpness, but what type of cuts to execute or what type of targets we could find, because cutting a water bottle or cutting a tatami or cutting a even like fabric wrapped around a pumpkin or something like that, they're all going to yield slightly different results. So it's something to consider how I'll set up the experiment and what type of strikes I need to to yield. Someone is noticing
The
your
Nihonto squad, yeah.
libations this evening.
Yeah, I've got Bizen wear for my Bizen Tachi.
Yeah.
I do wanna actually point out something, and there's a bit of a as with Uchigatana, people are used to the 1.4 to 1.8 centimeter curvature, general measurements. Obviously, the Tachi that you and I have, whether it's the
Mhm.
antique that I have or the Romance of Men or even the custom replica that I have, isn't indicative of all Tachi. There are
Right.
Tachi that are almost complete well, there are Tachi that are just completely straight.
Sure.
There are Tachi that are, uh, only curved in the handle. There are Tachi that are curved only in the blade and the handle's completely straight. There are Uchigatana that are like that. So, you can't classify all Tachi under, like, the Torizori, Tori
Mhm.
for Tori gate style curvature. There's obviously Koshizori, which I'd argue is probably the most common type of Tachi, especially in the old days. Uh, Torizori, I'm blanking on the other ones, but yeah, like, we can test the Tachi that we have, but
Yes.
ultimately it's not representative of all Tachi. Do I wanna do cut testing with a the my sensei's 800-year-old Kanukigata Tachi? Sure, who wouldn't? At the same time, that's gonna be completely different. Like, if it was a brand new sword, that would be completely different results to my Tachi. So, we gotta keep that in mind. Like, obviously, not all long
Yeah.
swords are the same. You got the
Yeah.
whole oak shot typology. You've got the for falchions, you got the Elmsley typology. That would be impossible with Japanese swords. So,
Right, right. The generalizability is you always have to be careful of. And I'm just glad that we have even one decent one that's on market that is going to be easy to access, because again, this is something that I've been interested in for a while. But like you said, it's kind of only one drop in a pretty broad bucket. We have so many different types of katana that are out there for consumption. But in general, katana are kind of narrow in their distribution. Antique katana tend to be reasonably similar to one another compared to looking at antique tachi that tend to be more dissimilar and have a bigger range of shapes and sizes and lengths and weights when compared to one another. So yes, you're correct. We're only looking at one tiny little sliver of that whole broader distribution of what type of swords were used, especially if you want to go all the way back to the Heian when
or even go
when
further, because
yeah.
I mean, when you and I and Francis were looking at the Futsuno Mitama, that's a Tachi,
Yeah.
and that's not even a back curved sword. That's a forward curved sword.
Yes.
Um,
Go ahead. Mhm.
I mean, there are the completely straight Tongdao Tachi. There are, I mean, Dojigiri, the famous Tachi. And then there's that famously, I mean, there's the image where they like show all the Tachi from the Heian period, or even the Chokuto to the latest Tachi. And even that image doesn't represent Tachi at all,
Yeah.
because the Tachi that they use for that time period that my Tachi's from is not indicative at all of just how varied Tachi can be, especially in
Yeah.
a wartime setting.
Mhm.
So it's it's difficult, to put it simply. It's like you can't even compare, like, handguns from 50 years ago to today. There's just so little, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's a topic that really is vast, and this is exactly why I wanted to have a discussion like this tonight, just so we could even start to scratch the surface of it a little, because it's to some degree underrepresented, which is funny because Japanese swords are some of the most popular swords, and there's more virtual ink spilled over katana than just about any other
That's an
sword type
understatement.
on the internet. And I to some degree think that Tachi get lost in the shuffle a lot. So I wanted to discuss them at least for at least we could have an hour to talk about them a little bit. And so this is great, and we can continue to revisit this topic as more stuff just comes up about them. Again, in the not too distant future, I'm going to be having a video where I'm going to be discussing different types of koshirai and how they develop, especially through the Warring States period, due to some new research that has come out. So that might require us to re re re-up and meet up again and discuss the new findings. But in the meantime, there will be plenty more sword reviews from both of us. Any parting thoughts you'd like to say, Guccikatana?
Uh, two things. I think what it's actually very funny that what the Uchigatana suffers from in the modern day being this very generalized weapon that everyone you when you think of a katana, you think of the general shape. It's actually very similar to what is occurring with longswords and Gen to an
Mm,
extent. Gen, most people will either think of the one from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
mm,
or they'll think of like random wuxia swords. And I know, our friend Aiden, I'm sure he's seen plenty of that. People will always think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that film Hero with Jet Li. I think it was Jet Li and
yep.
some other just same issue. And then, I mean, the claymores being unwieldy. You see that in video games, and it's always the same claymore with the quillons and everything. This is a very common occurrence in media, which is weird considering how swords aren't really used anymore, but they're such common media items, whether it's fantasy, cyberpunk, even just medieval fiction or nonfiction. You'll see swords like, I mean, in Kingdom of Heaven, they were using
Mm,
swords that are horribly out of date for that time period on both sides. Uh, I mean, even, I mean, like, let's say Ridley Scott, there were no trenches at Waterloo. So you'll see it all the time. And I think it's good that Tachi are kind of forgotten because it allows more developed discussion in a way.
mm,
It's tragic, but it allows more nuanced discussion because I mean, it would be a nightmare to get into Tachi, and the first thing you Google is Tachi are like it's the same thing you'd Google when you first see like katana, like oh Tachi are like the end all be all of swords. So
yeah,
yeah,
they've been spared from having to have all the misinformation spread about them so far. Well, good. Maybe the first thing that Google will pick up on Tachi is a discussion by Gucci Katana on our little YouTube channel right here.
we can only hope.
All right, last question before we sign off by Joe Max.
Okay, Harakiri,
Mm,
1962 by
mm,
Masaki Kobayashi. That is the film. I mean, low hanging fruit. It's the film that got me into the wider sword collecting and to pursue martial arts again,
mm,
especially sword martial arts. I think if I hadn't seen that film, I mean, I've been playing For Honor. I'd read Shigeru,
mm,
but Harakiri for me was like such a grounded movie. The way it depicted sword fighting, it wasn't flashy. It depicted very like, I mean, at the end there's a huge bloodbath and whatnot, but the sword fighting was so grounded. I was like, this is awesome. And there wasn't a focus on gore like you see in a lot of modern films today.
yeah.
I don't care about gore, but it's weird when there's an over focus on it. And Harakiri, despite it has a scene where a guy cuts his stomach open with a wooden blade, and that's
Mhm,
very brutal, but
yeah.
it's like the godfather of Jidaigeki.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
if you appreciate samurai films and Jidaigeki as a whole, Harakiri has got to be in your top 5 because it's just so good. It's my number 1 film ever. So it's why I modeled my like, yeah, this is like Edo period clothing, but the muted colors and everything that I go for in the black on black Koshirai is inspired by Harakiri. So easily Harakiri, 1962. Watch it.
It's hard to turn that one down. I will add to that, not a surprising one at all. I'll say Shichini no Samurai. I like my Kurosawa. I'll go with the long ass director's cut. We'll go with the super long version of that one. More recently, one that's just fun and silly. I like the '03 version of Zatoichi with by
Beat Takeshi, yeah.
Kitano, yeah, version. That one is very stylized and fun. But to be honest, the action in it, even though it's not that much, the action in it is actually pretty good. Like I'm there, it's not as ridiculous as some of the other sword fighting that you see in some other movies. So I think and the rest of it, I think that the story is just kind of fun in general. So I like
I have
that.
to bring up a modern Jidaigeki. It's not
Mhm.
even really a Jidaigeki. It's called a Samurai in Time. It came out a
Mhm.
couple years ago, I think last year, and it's a story about these two samurai, and actually three if you watch the whole movie,
Mhm.
where they're fighting at the very end of the Edo period, and they're trying to kill each other, and then they both get struck by lightning, and they're transported to the modern day, and they become Jidaigeki actors, and it's a phenomenal film, and I won't spoil the twist, but it's so well done, and it has all these callbacks to I forget the name of it, but there's a type of actor where you're the designated, guy to get cut down, you're the extras that get cut
Mhm.
down in films, and it explores that role that is dying because Jidaigeki, until recently, has been on the downturn,
Mm.
and it's really good film, and the sword fights in it, they're a little whatever, but I can tolerate because it's a good film. I think A
Cool.
Samurai in Time is a probably my top modern film. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. There you go, Max. You've got a couple recommendations. Hopefully, you've seen most of them. And if not, you got some catching up to do. All right, gang. I hope this all was an entertaining Saturday night for you. We thank Guccikatana very much for being able to come on the channel and discuss not only Japanese swordsmanship, but also look at some antiques, have a nice drink of some Bisen pottery, and talk Tachi. We will be back on the channel next time with even more swords. Say goodnight.
Have a good one,
All
y'all.
right.
Good night.
Bye, guys. And